Hey everybody, welcome back to Drinkers and Thinkers. This is episode 9. I'm Dan, and I'm going to be dragging you through the next hour of content. A little bit different on the show today. It's all me. I'm flying solo. There's no guests today. There's no interview. But what I've done is I've grabbed some questions from the community, questions from listeners and whatnot. So I'm going to intersperse them throughout the podcast. This is actually something that I've been wanting to do, and I had some fun with this. This is fun for me. So stay tuned till the end, and I'm going to talk about more ways that we can engage together, because I've got some fun things planned. So that's going to be this episode. It's about an hour long, so it's not one of the super bloated ones. So I'm sure you're all breathing a sigh of relief, because I know after about 30 minutes I got to shut myself off. So I also apologize because I ramble a bit in this episode, but that's just the way my mind works, from one thing to another, kind of like a little terrier chasing a car and then chasing a mailbox because the mailbox was there. What can I say? That's how things go. Also, if you want to email us at thedrinkersandthinkers@gmail.com, you can visit our website, drinkersthinkers.com. And again, if you stay tuned to the end, I'm going to talk a little bit about some things I have planned for the website to sort of fill that out a little bit and make it more of a place to visit just more than once. So stay tuned to the end for that. I also want to say that we have our first affiliate here at the podcast, and it's Drizzly. Drizzly is the alcohol delivery app. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. It's a great service. It sources liquor, wine, beer from your local stores who will deliver, and you can get 1 hour delivery in many cases for the things you want/need, especially in pandemic. It's a great tool, and I use it. I've mentioned it on the show before. I used it to fulfill the gift for the winner of our first giveaway. So I love Drizzly, and now I assume anywhere you're looking at this podcast, in descriptions and whatnot, you can follow our affiliate link there, and it of course helps the podcast out, but it helps you out more because you're getting alcohol after you pay for it. It's still helpful. It is. All right, well, without any more from me, let's get into the episode. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you at the end. So we had a few more Supreme Court rulings come down this week. These are always fascinating to me. I'm a bit of a SCOTUS-phile. There are two big ones this week. One deals with abortion. The other deals with religious schools, of all things. And I actually want to take a minute or two on that one. The abortion one, I think, was fairly straightforward. It was out of Louisiana. This is the June Medical Services versus Russo. The idea here was Louisiana trying to limit a woman's ability to obtain an abortion. This was a restrictive law. It dealt with a doctor. If you were a doctor providing an abortion service, then you would, by law, then have to have admitting privileges at a local hospital. Absolutely designed to restrict access to abortion, so no surprise it ends up in the Supreme Court. Now, what may have been a surprise is John Roberts' left turn on this. John Roberts basically made the majority here. It was the liberal justices and John Roberts in a 5-4 decision ruling that this law was restrictive and couldn't stand. Now, on the one hand, this is similar to a few years ago, a nearly identical law in Texas, which the Supreme Court also struck down. What's interesting, though, is Roberts was on the other side of it at that time. It was a different court then, and it was still a close ruling, but Roberts was not on this side of it. But what this shows is his very consistent views of the court, very consistent views of their job and their charge, and respecting their own precedent. The court has ruled on this in Texas, and here it comes up again, and I think this is a very clear message. This isn't, for John Roberts, I think, this isn't about abortion. He's not trying to, promote abortion. What he's doing is sending a very clear message that the Supreme Court is not willing, in their very limited time and their very important work, to hear this challenge from 40 states in the next 10 years. So it's a no to Texas, it's a no to Louisiana, very clearly from John Roberts, saying, stop this shit. We're not going to litigate every state that decides to test us right now. So, it's a win for the court. Obviously, it's a win for, the pro-choice movement. But it's a win for the court as well. Roberts' court, again, asserting, he looms so large now. He's going to have a fascinating place in history. He really will. And I don't think we've seen the end of it for sure. I think there's more fireworks to come out of the Roberts court. The other thing, though, and the very interesting case comes out of Montana. This is Espinoza v. Montana Department of Revenue. And this deals with public funds for private religious schools. This case was ruled 5-4, again 5-4, but this time it was the conservatives who had the majority, and the liberals in the minority. And the question here was whether or not a state could ban religious schools from obtaining publicly available funds for private schools. In other words, the state is providing funds in the forms of whatever it is, subsidies and whatnot, for private schooling, be they charter schools, be they, occupational schools, whatever. But the state is restricting the access to that money from religious schools on the grounds that they're religious schools. Obviously, this is a win for the right. This is a win for the religious freedom crowd, and I'm air quoting on religious freedom. This is a blow to the left, obviously, who would have liked to see this go the other way. And while I make no bones about my, not just my atheism, but my anti-religiousism, I actually think this was the correct ruling here. And I know that may surprise people. I think this was the correct ruling. Because here's the thing. This goes to the heart of the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause. You cannot treat... And look, we just litigated this with the case on protection for gays in the workplace, for transgendered persons in the workplace. We just litigated this. That the equal protection afforded by the Constitution is in fact very broad, and whatever may be written down in black and white was not written down with the intent to exclude all of the things that weren't written down. So the protections are very broad. The 14th Amendment says I have to treat person A in the same manner I have to treat person B, and there can be no arbitrary reason to treat the two differently. That also applies to, in this world we live in, and you can like this or not like this, but corporations and other entities have to be treated the same way as well. You cannot treat one business differently than you treat another business. Those businesses are entitled to their 14th Amendment protections. So a school, two schools, one religious, one not, cannot be treated differently on some arbitrary grounds. So if public money is available to schools, then a private religious institution should be able to avail themselves of that money just the same as a private vocational school or a private day school or anything else. Now, do I think religious schools should be getting public money? No, I don't. This wasn't the way to go about that, but I don't. Do I think religious education should exist at all in this country as a supplement for real primary education? No, absolutely not. I don't think there should be Catholic schools and Christian schools. And let's be clear, that's what we're talking about here. In this country, we don't have, madrasas and whatnot. We have Christian schools. So do I think that Christian churches should be able to provide an alternate education to kids? No, I don't. I think it's incredibly dangerous. It flies in the face of logic and science. It's incredibly dangerous. Should they exist? No. But, and this is a common refrain for me, since we don't like that, if the majority of people don't like that, then it's up to the legislatures to legislate. Education is an issue that's largely left to the states. The states need to decide for themselves what is acceptable, what they want, what education should look like. Now look, I live in a state, New York, that is, quote unquote, progressive in all the right ways optically. We teach science in this state. It's part of the curriculum. We teach evolution in this state. It's part of the curriculum. We teach, we should learn a bit about viruses in this state, I suppose, but we teach all the things that you're supposed to teach if you're a progressive state. However, there is no prohibition on religious schools in New York State. So there are kids who go to school, and while they are getting that science education on the one hand, they are also getting a religious education at other times in the day on the other hand. And those two things are often contradictory. And the fact that they both happen under the same roof, that they both happen under the guise of these children's education, that creates in people's minds, especially children, that creates parity between the two arguments. That somehow they're both valid, when one is absolutely not valid at all. The creationism myth is not valid and should not be taught in a school setting, public or private. But the fact that they exist under the same roof creates parity. So yes, I would like to see funding drained from these schools. I'd like to see these schools go away. Now, there are sociological issues involved there. There are demographic issues involved there. And we can talk about them in a minute. But if we don't like religious education happening and we don't want public money flowing into it, the legislatures have to do their job. They have to lay down a curriculum and say you cannot be outside the bounds of this curriculum. Now, are there exceptions for homeschooling? Yes. A parent should be able to homeschool their kids. I know that's not popular, but there are a lot of schools of thought, so to speak. There are a lot of schools of thought on that. And at the end of the day, I don't care what your viewpoint is. I don't care if you're batshit crazy in Alabama or you happen to be incredibly bright living in New York and choose to homeschool your kids. Kids can get a very good education through homeschooling, but they can also get a very dangerous and cloistered education. But it's your kid. It's not really for us to say, as long as it's not costing the public money. It's a tricky issue. But as soon as you step into, state funding, federal funding, no, there should be a curriculum laid down. And if we don't think that any part of that should be religious, then we need to say that in our laws and say this is the curriculum and you cannot deviate from this, you cannot expound on this, and you cannot present bullshit alternate arguments to things like science and history. So if you want to live in a world that's free of religious indoctrination for your children in these schools, then the legislature needs to do its damn job of these various states all over and say this is what we will teach. And if you want money, this is what you can't teach. These are the guidelines. It's their job. And they need to step up and do it. Instead of trying to backdoor it and saying, well, if we just kind of choke off funding from these schools, maybe they'll go away. It's cowardly. Stand up, state your purpose, and pass a law. And stop litigating this kind of bullshit in the Supreme Court. It's as simple as that. Now, of course, what I'm suggesting is not actually simple. I recognize that because what I'm suggesting will meet with fierce First Amendment challenges, and those will, of course, be litigated in the Supreme Court. But at least say what you believe, at least pass laws based on what you believe is in the greater interest. But we don't live in that world, folks. We live in this world where, everything's a maneuver, everything is, testing the waters, where our politicians can't stand up and state their purpose. Our politicians can't answer a yes or no question without having a stroke. It's embarrassing. This issue needs to be fixed, so fix it. It's what you're getting paid to do. It's what you get paid for 100 days of work in a given year to do. So fix the issue. Okay, we have a question here from the audience, as it were. This is the first ever on Drinkers and Thinkers. This is from Carolina in New York. Carolina is asking about the fireworks, the sort of epidemic of fireworks going off in New York City, and apparently in New York's surrounding suburbs as well. I've heard of this as far as Connecticut at this point. And specifically, she's also asking, she's trying to get my read on the various conspiracy theories around the fireworks. I've heard a bunch of different conspiracy theories on this. I'm not a conspiracy guy. I think people know that up front. I've heard that, the police are basically giving out fireworks to people to make life miserable. I don't buy that, but here's the thing, and there's some truth there, and I think that sort of almost touches on exactly what I believe is going on here. First, it needs to be said, this happens every year. I look on social media, and particularly in New York City and in the nearby suburbs, people are every year are saying, please stop lighting off fireworks on, Monday night, June 26th. This happens every year around July 4th. And every year there's a chorus of voices saying, stop, please stop. Can't take it. Okay, first of all, I want to separate out the suburbs from the city. This is kind of a real issue in the city in that, A, the city is no place for fireworks, and B, it's awfully easy to enforce this in the city. You don't even need a 311 or 911 call because presumably wherever you are in the city, wherever you have set a firework off, there's got to be a cop mere blocks away from it who heard it as well. So what I think is going on specific to New York City, unfortunately, is when I look at where these fireworks are going off, and again, this happens every year, but it seems to be much heightened this year. Now, some of this may be protest-related, but I don't think most of it is. So what I'm seeing is these neighborhoods are largely in northern Manhattan. So you're looking at Harlem, Inwood, in the Heights, shout out. You're looking at neighborhoods in northern Manhattan. These are also neighborhoods that typically have a heavy police presence in them. So why is it worse this year? Why isn't it being tamped down on, especially when it's so blatant and so obvious? Well, the answer to that is very simple. The NYPD has traditionally, and other police forces as well, traditionally, when they're upset with something, when they get all disgruntled, they absolutely throttle back their enforcement of laws. And I think that's exactly what's happening here. I think the NYPD has made a decision amongst their ranks, amongst the union, that this is not necessarily a life or death issue, and that they're going to let this ride for a bit, that they're going to let it happen, that they're going to let people be a little miserable for a while, and that all is, I guess, their punishment for doubting the police. It's a disgusting way of doing business. The police have admitted to doing this in the past. They have absolutely admitted to doing this. They have no shame about this. So I'm not spouting wild conspiracy theories here. What I am, I'm just conjecturing that this is one such instance, because this. See, if it really is worse this year than any other year, well, that seems to be the variable here, that now police are all disgruntled, and this is the result. I don't really care that much about the firework issue. I don't. I can't, with everything else that goes on in the world, I can't summon empathy, and, I know the city is no place for fireworks. I get that. But it's also no place for a dog, and I believe that too. So, come at me, but I wouldn't raise a dog and I wouldn't raise a child in New York City. That's just me. So, I don't know. And I wouldn't shoot a firework off in New York City. It's no fun. They suck anyway. But look, when I lived in the suburbs, I lived a bit far north. North of Westchester County was the last suburb I lived in. And, there were lots of fireworks there, and no one really has any particular problem with the fireworks going off for, the week surrounding July 4th there. The world didn't end, and pets don't jump off cliffs because of it there. So I don't know, you got really neurotic animals in these surrounding suburbs, I guess. And yeah, maybe that sounds ignorant and flippant, but I can't sum it up, with everything else going on, I really can't summon it up in myself to care that much about the fireworks and what seems like an extremely inordinate reaction to them. If you live in a place like, Dutchess County or Putnam County, New York, which is nearby to the city, but still far removed, during the daytime, you're going to hear gunshots, people shooting off on their own range in their own backyards, and that just happens. And at night, you hear fireworks. It's not the end of the world, and, it's a good argument. It's not our fault, but this is all a pretty good argument for humans not living on top of each other. For what used to be, if you're living in Westchester County or Fairfield County or Suffolk County, what used to be, a 2-acre parcel with a house on it is now a 2-acre parcel with 12 houses on it. We probably shouldn't be living that way. And I know that's an awfully broad sociological statement, and we're not going to get into that, but, because you're 6 feet from your neighbor, yeah, your fireworks are a little more impactful than they would be if we were living with just a little space between us. I mean, your houses in some of these places are barely socially distanced. I mean, I live in New York City. I'm 3 feet away from my neighbor if I'm on the toilet. We weren't really, we weren't made for this. But I can't. I can't lose my mind over the fireworks. I hear them sometimes. It's not that bad in my neighborhood. I hear them sometimes, and it just happens, and it goes away. And in a week or two, it's going to be gone. So if there's any solace, it's going to be done soon. So just, get through it. There's a pandemic, and we've gotten through that for, 4 months now. You'll get through the great scourge of our time that is fireworks. But in terms of the conspiracy, that's it. I think the NYPD has just decided, and this is obviously specific to New York City. I don't know what goes on elsewhere, but I think most definitely the NYPD has decided that they're going to let this roll as sort of punishment, specifically for these neighborhoods where it's the worst, which is disgusting, and yet another example of the power that the police union wields and the lengths to which they're willing to go just to be vindictive. This isn't even to, quote, get what they want or anything. This is just to be vindictive. This is just punitive. So it's gross, and that's that, I guess. All right, another listener question here. This is from Jeff in Virginia. Jeff asks, doesn't all lives matter include black lives? What's the problem? Question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark. Well, Jeff with a G, so listen, Geff. All lives matter. Look, I don't want to give oxygen to this all lives matter nonsense. All lives matter is not a grand statement of purpose. It sounds lovely in a vacuum, but it's not a grand statement of purpose and statement of your beliefs. All lives matter is simply a frustrating counter to Black Lives Matter. It's the way you sort of, you being people like you, ignorant people, deflect the very real purpose behind Black Lives Matter. Saying all lives matter is the kid who always used to say, I know you are, but when am I? I know you are, but when am I? I know. It's childish, it's petulant, and it's stupid. Black Lives Matter is a real slogan with real meaning behind it. And in fact, look, I'll go so far as to say this. Black Lives Matter is one of the best slogans, if you will, to come out of the left in years. Because, and we talked about that. I think just last episode we talked about how bad liberals are. Yeah, it was defund the police. What a stupid statement that is for your cause. How bad liberals are at language and how good conservatives are. Well, Black Lives Matter defies that. Black Lives Matter is a brilliant statement of purpose. It's a brilliant marketing tool. And make no mistake, when you're protesting, when you're trying to raise awareness, that is marketing. It is public relations. And you have to treat it as such. And you should have, and they do have, professionals working on this, on the messaging. That's the only way you win, is if you get the message out there in a clear and concise way. Liberals are terrible at this. Conservatives excel at this for some reason. I think it's because conservatives keep it very simple, and the MAGA crowd tend to be very simple people, so it's very easy for them. You know, if you look at a rally, you see very simple messaging, and thousands of people who are able to remain on the message. You see MAGA. That's simple. Or just spell it out. Make America great again. It doesn't give you a list of things that we should make America. It just says make America great again. It gets the point across. Whereas if you look at Black Lives Matter, Then you see all these things on social media. Some people post Black Lives Matter. It's evocative. It conveys exactly what you want to convey. But then you see on social media the people who decide they need to break this down into subgroups. Black women's lives matter. Black trans lives matter. Black construction workers' lives matter. Black police lives matter. And there's this list of like 19 different Black lives that matter. Well, Black Lives Matter covered all of that, and it did so eloquently. But you, the liberal, can't stay on message. You have to tweak and subdivide it into 100 different things. Here's the thing, folks. When you're dealing with this sort of public relations, and again, this is public relations, when you're dealing with things like this, here's my take. If you post something on social media that's supposed to be evocative, like Black Lives Matter, you need to look at it and ask yourself, is this something that I could say in conversation to convey meaning? So if you look at those crazy lists of all the different Black lives that matter, and you say to yourself, would I say this in conversation? No one's going to sit there for 5 minutes while you recite a whole list of different Black lives that matter. It's enough to say Black Lives Matter. It's all-encompassing. That is understood. Even by our opponents on this issue, it's understood. But if you have Black Lives Matter, yes, that's all you need to say in conversation. It conveys everything you need to say. But this obsession with subdividing it down and parsing it out, look, conservatives, they've got their boogeymen. Hillary Clinton, George Soros. That's all they need to say. That's all they need to say. Look, in conservative conspiracy circles, there's a list of like 45 people that the Clintons have supposedly killed. They don't feed that to their rally audiences. They don't send them out with 40 different names on their t-shirts, expect people to memorize all these people that the Clintons have, allegedly killed. All they need to do is just say Hillary Clinton, George Soros. That's it. That's their boogeyman. And that conveys everything they need to convey. They don't need to list the 45 people that Hillary Clinton has allegedly killed. They don't need to do that. Because it's a waste of time, and it destroys the clarity of message. You have to keep it simple, and Black Lives Matter is such a good message. And it can be abbreviated in a way that's very pleasing. BLM instantly conveys what you're talking about. And you can even eliminate the alphabet from it, and you just have the iconography of the fist. These are great messaging tools that liberals have come up with. But then they ruin it. It's like the day where we were all supposed to put a black square on our social media. And I woke up, I put my black square down, and then, for the first 6 hours of the day, people are going nuts saying, wait, you weren't supposed to hashtag the thing with the thing because of this and that. You just make it so complicated. You make it so complicated. You need to subdivide. You're bad at this. Liberals are bad at this. You need to take lessons from the conservatives. Simple is better. Black Lives Matter. It should stop right there. It's an incredibly powerful message. It doesn't need expounding on. Stop that shit. It's confusing. And nobody outside your echo chamber is going to stick around to read it. Nobody. And again, it doesn't pass the verbal test. If you can't verbalize it effectively, then it shouldn't be part of your messaging on social media. I actually just had this conversation this week about LGBTQIAP. What an absurd acronym. LGBTQIAP. The argument was that LGBTQIA plus was mean because it excluded the P and only the P. So just get rid of the plus and add the P. And I'm saying, why don't you get rid of 7 letters and make it L plus? Because it's a ridiculous acronym. Acronyms are supposed to make things easier for us to express in language and writing. And we have some great acronyms. We have FBI, CIA. We know what those are. IRS. No one likes them, but we know what it is. It's a great acronym. AA, AA, AAA. We know what that is. Some acronyms are even longer, like, NAACP. But that's a great one because it flows off the tongue. You get when Congress passes the financial aid package for the pandemic. What did they call it? Was it HELP? I think it was HELP. Whatever those letters stood for. Believe me, that wasn't random. They started with help or care, or they found some word that was warm and fuzzy and then said, okay, what can we fill in the blanks that start with these letters? It was purposely chosen. For some reason, LGBTQIAP communities don't care about the language here. You can't say that in conversation. Again, it goes back to the verbal test, the conversation test. I can't be in a conversation and say, well, when thinking about the LGBTQIAP community, it's absurd. Nobody talks like that. So stop writing it down. Find something better. Find something that is more effective. Because much like defund the police, when you say that, the conversation then becomes about, oh my God, you want to get rid of the police altogether forever? Instead of what you want the conversation to be about. There's no clarity when you say defund the police. The conversation becomes about something else. And when you say, if you can even get it out to somebody, again, that's not in your echo chamber, that needs to be educated on the issue, if you say LGBTQIAP, the conversation becomes about what the hell the A, the I, the Q, and the P stand for. Now, I know, you know, the people in the bubble know, the people in the community know, but the people whose minds we need to change, they don't know. And it shouldn't become about the letters. We don't have to explain every single letter. We need a broad statement of purpose that say, much like the Supreme Court just did, all sexually oppressed people are protected by the Constitution. All sexually oppressed people are protected in the workplace. So whether that's your sexual identity, your sexual preference, your gender identity, it encompasses all of that. And this is a community that desperately needs a better acronym. I think I strayed massively from the point. So in summary, Geff from Virginia, fuck the All Lives Matter crowd. I have no time for that. And let me also state very clearly once again, Black Lives Matter. All right, getting back to some news, we've got the Russian bounties scandal this week. This is a behemoth. I don't even know where to start with this. First of all, my gut instinct is that, yes, absolutely, this is true. This is not made up. This is not a hoax. This sounds right up Russia's alley. And all you need to know to understand that this is certainly plausible is that we used to do the same damn thing. I mean, we did the same damn... We did this. Maybe not payment for bodies, but we did this to the Russians when they were in Afghanistan themselves. We made life very difficult. We made sure Russian soldiers died. We have paid for political assassinations in South America like it's our job for decades. So, yeah, this is absolutely plausible. Donald Trump is a piece of shit. Now, that being said, do I think he was briefed on this? I don't know. Because this is a guy with the attention span of a vending machine. So I don't know that, the report is, I guess, the thing that I read that seems the most credible is that he was given a written briefing on this. Well, there's your problem. He doesn't read. And I'm not saying that as a point of insult, although it is, and he should be ashamed. He himself has said he doesn't read. He's an audio learner. He needs to hear things. And all of his briefings need to be verbal. And there's only so much stuff you can fit in verbal briefings. So do I believe he was aware of it? I don't think so. I actually don't think so. If it was just a written briefing, then no. Now, is that a dereliction of his responsibility? Sure. If a national security memo passes your desk, it's incumbent on you, the president, to, read it. But do I think that this president did? No. It matters a whole lot less to me, to be honest, because what I think people are sort of missing here is everyone's, going out and railing against Donald Trump, but isn't the actual problem that Russia has overtly committed acts of war against the United States. And this is not the first time. Shouldn't our anger be directed there? That they're actually, I think liberals sort of, they view Russia as the boogeyman puppet master, but I don't think they actually believe it. I think it's just something they say because they hate Donald Trump so much. But in actuality, they are the boogeyman. Well, they're not the boogeyman because boogeymen aren't real. They are an adversary. They are an enemy more and more. Our focus should really be there and not on whether or not Donald Trump can read. Spoiler alert, he can. He's a moron. But our focus needs to be on Russia right now, which is all the more argument, by the way, for getting a real president in that office or somebody who has some understanding of foreign relations and somebody who's not going to blunder their way into diplomatic disasters and someone who's not going to let Vladimir Putin walk all over them. Now, I'm not suggesting that that's Democrats because there's been no evidence of that. But you know what? I think there's a better shot with Joe Biden in that Oval Office than with Donald Trump. This is just a further argument that this guy has got to go before we reach points that we can't. I mean, look, we've already crossed lines with the pandemic. We can't get this one back. So, yeah, this guy's got to go. And attention needs to be paid here. And what is Congress doing this week? They're condemning China. Okay, fine. I get it. Human rights abuses. They just trampled all over Hong Kong, but not Russia. We're not gonna pass any unanimous consent resolutions about Russia. Of course not. We're very quick to condemn China right now. And I get it. Look, I mean, they had an agreement in place with Hong Kong for some form of independent governance that was set to expire, by the way. I think it was 50 years from the British handover. And they've trampled all over it. And they're doing what they always do, and they do very well, and that is suppress political opposition. I actually was shocked it took them so long in Hong Kong. They exhibited incredible patience. And here we are, and I don't mean patience in a good way. I mean that they simply waited way longer than I thought they would to start cracking heads. But how the hell we are condemning them for doing the very thing that we just spent weeks watching our own police and military do to our own political dissenters? How do we have a moral authority to condemn the Chinese for this? It's mind-boggling to me. The level of hypocrisy involved here. It's mind-boggling. Congress has unanimously said that cracking down violently on protesters and arresting them for no reason is a bad thing. Just not in New York or Seattle or the South, but in China. In China, it's a bad thing. It's unreal, the hypocrisy of it. Yes, China kind of annexed Hong Kong. I mean, they haven't because it was theirs anyway, and that whole thing was complicated. And look, one day they're going to annex Taiwan. And we'll condemn them, I'm sure, but we'll sit by and do nothing. And Russia annexes Crimea. And we condemn it, kind of, but we do nothing. Israel annexes land from their neighbors. And we say nothing. Some of us speak up. Most of us say nothing. Democrats and Republicans who shill for the Israeli state. So we have no moral authority on this. None. It's baffling to me. This week has also brought a lot of bad coronavirus news. And as I feared last week, this has sort of leaked into New York as well. We've had setbacks here now that restaurants in New York City cannot open indoors now. A number of businesses, including gyms and movie theaters, were sort of booted from the phase 4 of reopenings. So we're not on a great trajectory, although I feel that New Yorkers continue to do the right thing by and large, compared to a lot of other places. But We're feeling it again. And I'm not going to talk about the virus and all that, but what I am going to reiterate is, and this is going all the way back to episode 1, is the government needs to act. My God, the government needs to act. The $1,200 pittance is not going to cut it. John Oliver also did a recent piece on the moratorium on evictions is either up or coming up in a lot of places now. And you're going to see mass evictions. And the government really needs to step in and figure out exactly what they're going to do and take care of this situation. We're way beyond moratoriums on evictions now. There are conceivably millions of people who have not been able to pay their rent or pay their full rent for now 4 months, 5 months in some cases. With just a moratorium on eviction in places, that means that there are people, September 1st, that are going to owe $12,000. I mean, the average apartment in New York City is what, $2,600? I mean, that's 5 times 26, that's like $12,000, $13,000 you're going to owe. And then what? Then you're just going to be evicted. The government, there are so many facets to this that need to be addressed desperately right now. Obviously, the PUA is a big part of that. And Congress has given no indication that any of this is moving forward. Small businesses still need more help. Even people who are back to work need help. And that's sort of going to develop into a really big problem because the Republicans seem hell-bent on punishing working people. The Republicans seem to be of this mind in the Senate that the $600 a week has now deterred people from going back to work. The problem is, if you exclude vast swaths of Americans because they can, quote-unquote, go back to work, what you're not understanding is most people are not going back to the same situation pre-pandemic. If you work in the food service industry, you've gone from, maybe bringing home $500 a night to bringing home $100 a night. Nobody is going back to a normal work environment. Now, obviously, there are some people who are, their salaries have maintained, but those people are people whose salaries have maintained throughout, largely. And these tend to be people with more means. Poor people who go back to work because Mitch McConnell has decided he's going to force them back to work are not even going back to the pittance they were making before. There are reduced hours. There is no tipping going on. There's a whole host of issues. And, by the way, there are massive bills due for these people in the form of 4 months of rent, 4 months of electric, 4 months of insurance. It is inconceivable that half of Americans could weather this without more help. And we get nothing. We get nothing. And even in states where, I know everyone loves Andrew Cuomo. Yay, Andrew Cuomo. New Yorkers need help desperately. All we get from Cuomo is what we're not allowed to do. But because this state is so piss poor managed fiscally, there's no money to help anyone. It's great to tell everyone, stay at home, don't go to work. But who's going to pay us? Certainly not Cuomo. The government has got to do something. The stock market is not an appropriate barometer of where this country is at. The bottom is going to fall out. I mean, it's fallen out already, but the economic disaster of this, the humanitarian disaster that we are creating through our inaction, through sheer callousness or ignorance, is unimaginable. And it's unimaginable because not one single other developed nation finds themselves in this position. I mean, Congress has an approval rating of like 20%. I'd like to know I'd like to know who's in that group. Who thinks that they're doing a good job? Our government, specifically our two-party autocracy, has failed us over and over and over again. And it's in ways that people always sort of laugh off when I say it pre-pandemic. But now in the midst of this, it's not so funny anymore, is it? It's not so funny when crazy Uncle Dan says, government doesn't care about you. It's not so funny anymore. I didn't need to be convinced. I know what our government is. I know that we live in one of the most corrupt kleptocracies in the world. But this should illustrate it for everyone. And how there is not rioting in the street, I'll never... And I know that's ironic since there recently was riot, but not over this. Not over the fact that the government has decided to just sort of let us bleed out, to sort of cull the herd. Cull the poor is what they're doing. And they've been on that kick for years. I mean, if I were a conspiratorial person, it's almost as if they have weakened poor people to just the right extent that when nature came along and walloped us, it would get rid of a whole lot of the poor people. So here's a pandemic, or, a mega earthquake, or a volcanic eruption, whatever it is. At some point, if you weaken the poor enough, we can cull the herd. That seems to be what the government has done. Now, I don't think it's conspiratorial, and I don't think it's just born out of greed and ignorance. But greed and ignorance are crimes unto themselves, and these kleptocrats that we call Democrats and Republicans should be made to answer for these crimes somehow, some way, at some point, but I don't think that day will ever come. I don't think it will. I think we Americans are just so used to rolling over and dying for these people. Literally, in some cases. Oh, I've had enough. All right, another listener question. This is a 3 times asked question. So we have Jim from New Jersey, we have Paul from New York, and Jessica from Connecticut, all asking about school reopenings in the fall. Oh boy. I can certainly, I'm self-aware enough to know that when I don't have the answer to something, I don't have the answer. I don't know what the answer is here. Should they reopen? Can they reopen? Well, sure they can. Should they? I don't know. And this is something that, unfortunately, this varies greatly from place to place. New York City schools being closed is an incredibly destructive and dangerous situation. This is for working parents in New York City. This is extended daycare for the kids, for the working poor in New York City and the homeless in New York City with children. This is a meal or 2 meals for their kids. And look, is that the job of educators to feed and babysit? No, but we, the society, have decided, and this sort of ties back to a lot of the problems we have with the police. We've decided that this is the way that we're going to sort of foist these problems off on the education system in this case, that the problems of homelessness and the problems of poverty, we're just going to say, you know what, schools will take care of this. It's fine. So instead of instituting any kind of real change, any kind of legislation that might actually help lift people out of these situations, we just say, yeah, you know what, we'll feed the kids at school and we'll watch them to 6 p.m., and that's what we'll do. That's not a solution to poverty, but that's what we do here in America. And it's the same with the police. The police handle a vast array of things that an armed officer doesn't need to handle. But we don't have any other solutions, so we send the police. So it is kind of imperative that New York City schools open as soon as possible. And I would imagine that holds true of large cities all over America, especially ones that have large populations of working poor and homeless. It's imperative. Now, is it imperative that the suburbs open? Middle-class neighborhoods? I mean, it's important to development of children that they not be locked in their house all day. I also think we all need to admit right now that Zoom learning, that or Google or whatever you're using, that's sitting in front of a screen all day is just about the worst form of engagement that you could possibly have. Now look, I'm not laying any of this at the feet of teachers. Nobody was prepared for this, which is an indictment of leadership, but not of educators. We have asked educators to radically rethink how they educate, and there are no tools for this. I mean, we've asked them to do things that there's no blueprint for, there's no tools for. I mean, these schools are using third-party software. Just say, oh, yeah, okay, go on Zoom. Oh, you know what? Google Learning or Google whatever the hell it is. And by the way, we also have to understand for those without kids, I think there's this image that the teachers are sitting on Zoom for 6 hours talking to the kids. That's not what's happening. There are these, like Google Learning, I think it's called. The kids are basically getting virtual textbooks and being left to their own devices on Zoom. It's sort of like if you've ever taken a test online, like a serious one, like a insurance driver safety course online, where you have to sit in front of it for a certain amount of time and read and interact. And, I took a real estate license course online where you sit and you interact and you're stuck in that chair. I mean, that's a lot of what's going on here. And the real shame is that, with all the modern technology and the internet at our disposal and all these tools for research at our disposal, that no modern means of education has yet been developed, that we're so stuck in the way we do things that nobody has yet figured out a way to use these mediums to their best effect. To possibly give the best education we possibly can to kids stuck home all day, rather than just what is going on, I'm sorry, is just passing the time, because engaging in this way is incredibly difficult for most people. I can't work at home. I can't even do the most simple tasks at home. I have to be in an office for me to get my work done. And I'm a grown adult. No, I'm a grown adult with terrible attention span, but nonetheless, this is torture for kids. If you asked a kid, hey guys, you want a year off from school? They would cheer and scream and be thrilled. But the reality of that, no kid is happy with this right now. No teacher is happy with it. The teachers are not home in perpetual happy hour enjoying their vacation. This is miserable because on top of all of their responsibilities, now they're having to learn how to do things that they weren't trained to do, teaching online. What the hell does that mean? There's no blueprint. They're making it up. It takes research. It takes time. Everything that they would normally do has been compounded. So my hats go off to the teachers that have stuck it out. I don't know what I would do. I've been educated to do one thing, and then now, for the foreseeable future, possibly a year or more, I'm going to have to do it some other way that I'm not prepared to do. That's miserable. There's no good solution. I mean, there are probably good solutions here. Nobody's thought of any. And it seems, unfortunately, nobody is trying to think of any, because we are so stuck in the status quo. And this, this is a broader issue, because when we talk about, antiquated learning, our entire educational system is antiquated. I mean, we go to school based on an agrarian calendar. And anytime you talk about extending the school year or extending the school day or trying to do anything differently, everyone's heads explode. Parents go nuts. The teachers' unions go nuts. So it's no surprise that even in this scenario, we are still stuck in the neutral. We're still stuck in the old way of doing things. And I don't know how we get out of that, but it illustrates my point that schools desperately need to reopen. Because no good is coming of this. There could have been, I'm sure smart people could have figured something out to make the educational experience maybe even better than what they, I know Cuomo mentioned this. He said, well, this might change the way we teach forever. Well, not if you're not going to innovate. Not if someone's not going to tell us how it's going to be better. Yes, it could be better, given technology, given all of these things, but it's not. So we're stuck. And the old way, which already sucked in the classroom, sucks even more online. So, yeah, we need to get kids back to school. I feel there should be a real imperative there. And schools have to exist in a separate conversation than everything else. Look, in a perfect world, in school X, in a perfect world, you send all the kids to school in September. What you also do is you make sure that all of their parents are staying home. Okay, dad doesn't get to go to work. Mom doesn't get to go to work. We're going to provide, for those of you who can work at home, you're going to do so. For those of you who can't work at home, we're going to provide assistance. So that the important thing is that we get the kids in school in a controlled environment. So that we make sure all of these families do the right thing, stay inside, stay masked. The kids go to school, there are temperature checks and whatnot. But the most important thing is not that mom goes back to work at her Wall Street job. The most important thing is that Billy goes back to school and continues his education. And if that is our societal value, that we value education, which we always say we do, then it is in fact more important that we pay mom to stay home from work and we pay dad to stay home from work so that they can't bring the virus home. And we make sure that the kids can go to school. If that were our societal value, then that would be the solution. Teachers would have to isolate as part of their job. No beaches, no happy hour. You go to work, you come home. I mean, that sounds draconian. Sounds like you're living in China, but there's a reality here. Now, is that going to happen? No. So is sending kids to school a wild card? Yeah, that's a little frightening. But, these things, and I've said this early on, these things are about managing risk at the end of the day. We were, and again, I'm repeating myself from previous episodes, but we were sold a bill of goods on the shutdowns and whatnot, that all we had to do was flatten the curve. Flatten the curve. Stop the increase. And that is managed risk. Let's get through the worst of it. We were told we needed to give hospitals time to prepare. We needed to give them as much space and cushion as possible to prepare for the worst. And then once that curve was flattened, once those hospitals were prepared, we would inch back into normal life. That's not what has happened. That's what we were sold on. What we're really doing is hanging on to the last possible moment that we get a vaccine, and then we'll go back to normal. Well, that's not realistic. It's not realistic. And we can't keep, first and foremost, we can't keep schools in a holding pattern. Now, let me break away from the coronavirus issue for a moment. We've never talked about education on this program, and we actually do have an upcoming episode where we have a discussion about charter schools with a guest. So we're going to get into education a little bit, but let me just say broadly that our educational system in the United States sucks. I mean, it is bottom of the barrel when it comes to developed nations. So in the grand scheme of things, this all being said about the pandemic, in the grand scheme of things, does it really matter if our kids go back to school? No, because the quality of education they're getting, especially when you look at quality of learning versus time spent in the classroom, it's a joke. Everything about the system is terrible. So, maybe let's take this opportunity to rethink how we educate our kids very broadly, instead of the prison pipeline / college loan pipeline that we currently have in place, which was just simply formally known as the manufacturing workers pipeline of the 1950s. So we might take this opportunity to rethink our very broken and very antiquated system. So in that respect, no, I don't think kids are really missing out on a whole lot, to be honest. If we're being very honest, I mean, I think your average student in Korea, Japan, Scandinavian countries, Germany, probably learns more in 10 days of learning than United States kids learn in 2 months. But for a variety, if we're talking just about our current situation, for a variety of educational and sociological reasons, yeah, it's important that kids get back to school. I don't know how you safely do that. I don't think we can safely do that. But again, I think it's about managed risk. We can try and lessen the risk. Temperature scans, I guess, are good. The issue with this particular virus is the asymptomatic carriers, of which children probably make up the largest group. So I really don't know. I mean, I go back to the first thing I say is that I actually have no answer on this. I know that we need to get back to that normalcy for a lot of reasons, many of them not educational, but just societal. We need to get back. Will we? I don't know. I'm feeling more and more, And the last thing I'll say on this, because I know that this is sort of what's going. New York City is monolithic in its school system, and in that, at least there's an advantage there. I look at something like Westchester County, where I know that basically you've got 30 different districts, all coming up with their own bullshit plans. That doesn't help anyone, because that was Westchester specifically, their response to coronavirus was so piss poor to begin with, because they didn't act in concert. Because New Rochelle and Scarsdale decided to close down, and all the other schools were sort of scratching their heads thinking, well, what are we supposed to do? And then 2 weeks later, a bunch of other schools closed. And a week later, then all the schools were closed. There needs to be a unified response to this. And you're not going to get that in Westchester. Every school district has been left to their own devices. And what's so frightening about that, and sort of the problem in America in general, is we have a crisis of management and a crisis of expertise, is that the people that are planning these things, you're talking about school boards, which are largely just made up of parents. You're talking about teachers who have expertise in their field, but they're not virologists. They don't know the first thing about what's safe and what's not. Now, they can listen and take advice, but a lot of people are saying a lot of different things at this point. You're asking people who have no expertise in any of the pertinent realms to make these decisions. Just 4 or 5 people sitting in a room to make these decisions that affect not just the district, thousands of kids in some cases, but an entire county and a larger urban area. Everything about our response to everything is just crap. And this is just more of the same. I don't know what they're going to decide, but I know it's not going to be pretty. There's going to be no consensus unless, Cuomo sets forth some state mandated consensus, which to me would be preferable right now. Schools don't know what to do. Teachers don't know what to do, and I can't blame them for that. We've asked them to do a miserable thing here. This is not what they signed up for. And yeah, it's not what any of us signed up for. But they have a responsibility. Some of us can stay home and never think of our job while we're home. Teachers have a responsibility here. They can't just leave their jobs. This is not time off for them the way it is time off for many other people. This is doing their job with an added level of stress and responsibility. So, in the imaginary bill that Congress will pass that's going to help all Americans get through this financially, there should probably be a bonus in there for educators and first responders and doctors. There won't be, because there'll be no bill, or what does come out will be confused and cruel. But no one's getting a bonus, I can tell you that. But they deserve it. Well, that's my take on the schools. I don't really think I had much clarity there, and I'm sorry for that, but I'm as confused as everyone else on this. All right, well, I want to make sure this episode doesn't get out of hand, so we're going to move on. I want to talk briefly about the drink in front of me. Today, it's Hofbrau München. This is a beer from Munich, Germany, obviously. Hofbrauhaus puts out a whole line of beers. This is like I don't think it's fair to say it like this, but this is kind of their Budweiser. It's prolific over there. And I have very fond memories of drinking this in Munich at Oktoberfest. And also, this specific beer, I actually couldn't drink for like a year after Oktoberfest because it would just, I'd almost get sick, just the muscle memory of it, because we just drank so much of it during Oktoberfest, which was a great time, and I highly recommend visiting Munich during Oktoberfest. Maybe not this Oktoberfest, but in general. The beer itself, it's not that good. I'm not going to lie. It's not that good. There are far better German beers out there. There are even better Hofbrau beers out there. Their Dunkel, which is their dark, even their Oktoberfest beer is actually pretty pleasant compared to this. This is thin and sort of tasteless. It tastes like beer, and that is what it is. This is mass-produced. Obviously, this is not a craft beer. This is not a special beer out of Germany. This is their mass-produced beer. So as such, once in a while, I mean, it is refreshing. It is refreshing, and it'll foot the bill. It's certainly better than, it is absolutely better than Bud or Bud Light or Coors, but there are better beers out there. This happened to be in the refrigerator, and it's what I'm drinking today, Hofbrau. So I'm not endorsing the beer, but I am endorsing Munich for a visit. Great city, great people. Loved it. Loved my time there. So that's my endorsement. Also, I want to remind you that if you look in any of our descriptions or on our website or anywhere at all, I'll have my affiliate link for Drizzly, the alcohol delivery service of choice for me. I love them. I subsist off them when I need alcohol in a rapid fashion. Although when you say that out loud, you sound like an alcoholic. All right, but nonetheless, the Drizzly affiliate link is there, so check that out. Of course, it helps out the podcast, but it helps out you more because you'll, have alcohol. Finally, I want to talk very briefly about elections, and I'm doing this because it's not so much my final thoughts here, so much as it's a preview. In a few weeks, we will be talking in depth about elections, particularly about electoral systems, about the system obviously we use in the United States vis-a-vis the Electoral College and all of the things that surround that, and also talking about the various systems the rest of the world uses, what might work here, what could work here, what should be done here. So we'll get into all that. The reason for this is obvious. We have an election coming up, so it's topical. But this is always this is a perennial problem for the United States, from issues of voter suppression to simply how the system works being unfair. And I mean, look, I'm going to frame it for you in this way and leave it at this. 60 million people, roughly, voted for Donald Trump. 60 million people, roughly, voted for Hillary Clinton. 90 million people didn't vote at all. And those numbers tell a story. Now, the story is different depending on who you are and what your viewpoint is. But it's oft-cited that, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by 3 million votes. Here's the reality. If you take the people that didn't vote and you take the people that voted for Donald Trump, you have 150 million, roughly, people who did not want Hillary Clinton to be president. And by contrast, you also have 150 million Americans that did not want Donald Trump to be president. Regardless of people's reasons for not voting, or regardless of their reasons for voting for the party that they did, the reality is that not just a plurality, not just a majority, but a vast majority of eligible citizens in the United States did not want either of these two candidates. And if that doesn't sum up the way people feel, I don't know what does. Now, we're going to get into this, like I said, in a few weeks. I'm not precisely sure what episode this is going to land in, but we are going to get into this, and we're going to have a guest come on and talk about this and see if we can, make the world a better place, as we do. Well, that's it from me for this episode 9 of Drinkers and Thinkers. Again, check out our social media, Facebook and Twitter. You can email me at thedrinkersandthinkers@gmail.com. And in fact, you can send questions there, because I actually enjoyed taking questions from the listenership this week. That's actually kind of fun. And I'm going to take it one step further. And in coming weeks, I'm going to figure out exactly how to do it so that people can actually call in. I would love to get verbal questions, not just because conversation is fun, but also because I think spontaneous questions would be fun. Obviously, these I had seen in advance and was able to collect my thoughts just a little bit, although I did try and just go sort of as quickly as possible. But I wouldn't mind spontaneity, and I wouldn't mind doing it in a conversational way. Some short calls. We wouldn't do that every episode, but I'm going to figure out how to do that so that we can do that once in a while. I think that might be fun. That would be a fun opportunity to engage. But for now, you can email thedrinkersandthinkers@gmail.com. You can visit our website and join our email list. That's drinkersthinkers.com. The website is still what it is. It's one page. You can listen to the latest episode there. You can have the links to some of the other the platforms that we're on, and you can join the email list. In the near future, I'm going to start posting written content on that website, sort of a blog. I'm looking at different options on how to do that, on what to make that, what that should be. Of course, if you want to email me suggestions, I'm totally open to them. I also want to make sure that that blog is not just my voice on it. So I'm talking to a few other people that might contribute to that as well, so that it's not just one voice and not just one viewpoint that's being looked at in those blog posts. So that'll come soon. That'll be exciting. I look at that as a sort of a big expansion of the show. So hopefully you'll engage with that as well. I thank you for listening as always. Also check out our affiliate link for Drizzly, the alcohol delivery app. I thank you all for listening. Remember to think first, drink later, and often. And I'll see you next week.